Okay, we're getting ready to go into an interview with Brandon and Amy. Any moment now, they'll be jumping on here. Got about 3 minutes left. Just looking over the last few deals, I connected with these wonderful people on Facebook. I was delivering some marriage content, and we had internet a little bit, and then we started messaging a little bit, and I started hearing some stuff. And they were talking about their blog, and I went and checked them out. I was like, man, these guys got some awesome stuff. I was like, man, they have some real superhero powers, right? I was like, I want to connect with these folks and see what they're about. So I reached out and I said, hey, you guys want to come on? I'd love to have you to have an interview. They said, hey, we'd love to, which is another good sign. People that are impactors tend to be that way. They want to help. They want to provide value to others. And so here we go. We're gonna have a conversation. I'm gonna sit down and I got my coffee here ready to go. Got my pen, my notepad, and we will be kicking off any moment. Here we are. Let's go.
Yeah.
It's alive. It is alive. Let's go. Let's go. Excited, excited. Sometimes there's technical difficulties.
Or just us not knowing what we're doing.
Real life, right? Real life there. All right. But yeah, thank you guys for jumping on here with me. Do you guys have any kids, dogs, animals, or
We have a dog sleeping over there.
let's go?
We have Audra, our daughter, she's 23. She just moved to Memphis.
Okay.
And then we have a son who is 21 and he just got married in May.
All right. All right. Okay. So let's jump. I want to get into things. I don't want to get locked the time just in case you guys got some huge nuggets to drop. I don't want to miss all that. But just a way of introduction. Mehi, this is Brandon and Amy. We connected first on Facebook. We had interacted on a couple deals, and I reached out, have started messaging back and forth a little bit, and I'm like, these people have some content here. And he said, yeah, I got a blog. He said it in passing. I was like, hold on, slow down. He touched on it, ran past, went on there. I checked it out, started reading some stuff, seeing some of your articles, and I was like, let's go. And I said, hey, would you guys mind jumping on a call with us in conversation? He said yes. And so here we are now. It is going to be, I'll drop that later. Anyway, I'm excited. I have huge. No pressure now, guys. No pressure.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
just, I'm just excited to hear about who you guys are a little bit and what you're doing. So how long have you guys been married?
We just had our 28th anniversary on the 12th of August.
Let's go. Hey, that's commendable. 28 years.
Yep.
Woohoo.
Woohoo is right. If I had I wish I had those little gifts I could push real fast. I used to play around with them, but I want to break the computer. I'm one of those guys too, that should
Yeah.
just enough to be dangerous. Okay, so 28 years of marriage. How'd you guys meet?
We met at church in Denver, Colorado. I used to attend Brother Hale's church in Denver.
Okay.
And we met in 1994. It was August of 1994, and I was singing in the choir, and
All
she
right.
walked in the door, and something said, "Lord."
Oh, the music. You were like,
That's
there
it.
she is. What,
Yep.
what were you thinking in that space, Amy?
Well, I remember seeing him up there, and after church was over, he came off the platform and he just started shaking everybody's hands and giving everybody hugs. And I was like, wow,
A
he's like the
hugger.
friendliest person I've ever seen. And so, yeah, was my first impression, was just how friendly he was and just how he just had a lot of love for people.
Okay. So you got her with the tenor voice and the love for people. Well, good.
No, I was
He was
bass.
singing bass.
I was singing bass. I had my
There.
microphone back in the day.
He was just a big faker.
I was a big faker.
Even better. I wish I had bass. I used to always act like I could, but it never comes out right. Everyone just stop. Just stop. All right. Okay, that's cool. I did want to talk about the shame piece. I went on your article and I read through that. Kind of I don't want to jump ahead. Bring us up to that place to where you guys were getting ready to write this book on shame. I mean, this blog on shame. You're getting ready to enter into that space. Actually, that's too fast. Let me slow down a little bit. Are there any books or reference materials that you offer or you would say, hey guys, if you're gonna read something, this is what I read, what I suggest, something that's changed you, or a book that you've given out the most?
For me, I've probably recommended The Bait of Satan the most.
Beta.
I was like a big self-help book reader probably about 20 years ago.
Mhm.
Just trying to figure myself out, why I was feeling the way that I was. I wanted to put a definition to it, just to the feelings that were going on in my head. I like to keep things very organized in my life, and I feel the same way about my thoughts. I don't like to just have a lot of random thoughts going through my head. Like, I want to compartmentalize them so that I know how to recognize it, and then identify it and then deal with it.
Okay.
And so approval addiction was another one where I was like, oh, that's what's wrong with me here. So I'm really bad about finishing books. Like, I'll start them and then I'll get till the third chapter and I'm like, I got it.
I
Like,
got you.
so I can't really say there's one that just, other than the bait of Satan, there's not one that completely just defined my life. I'm just more of, I observe a lot. I observe a lot in people and things that I hear, things that I read, preaching, and I just kind of like just sort of take that in, and then I
Apply it.
let it
Yeah.
mill in my mind and marinate, and then I try to apply that where it's
I love that. I love that because that's how you get places faster, right? You watch people that have been there,
Mhm.
hence why you guys are here.
Mhm.
You hear their stories, you hear their journey, and then you duplicate it and you get their results without going through some of the pain, some of the another. You can't avoid all pain, right? That's
Right.
part of life. All right, is there something? I'll throw this one over to you, Brandon. Is there something that you've learned from a failure in your life, or something that's been rough or hard in the context of your marriage, that you thought was failure, but from that something beautiful came out of it, something that just changed you, changed your marriage, changed your home? Anything jump
Sure.
out?
I think, sorry, I cleared my throat. I think the one
I'm gonna
thing
be
is,
I'm gonna be clearing my throat, probably burping and all kinds of
sorry.
stuff. It's warming up, so
I mean, we've been married 28 years, right? And you think that you have it all together when you go into marriage, and you think that you have it all together when you're at home. But if you're not balanced in your spiritual life, if you're not balanced with yourself, if you're not confident in yourself and you can't communicate that to your spouse,
yeah,
that's just going to roll over into your emotional state, your emotional being, and you're just going to hide it all. I mean, I growing up, I was a product of an alcoholic father. My mother was she went to church, and I went to church with her, but I never really got established in what it meant to truly be apostolic, for one,
yeah,
but really to be in love with yourself, because my mom was dealing, and I'm not blaming my mom at all, or any of this, but I learned how to hide things. I learned how to sweep things under the rug.
yeah,
And that is just not healthy at all for a marriage, especially being open and honest in all that you do,
yeah,
with everything that you have going on in your life,
yeah, yeah. I
good
love
or
it.
bad.
And that actually triggered something I remember reading in that article, to where you mentioned, and we can start a little bit into this space, but you had mentioned this concept of sometimes with shame, even in the context of marriage, but you want to be an approver, you want to approve, you want
Mhm.
to bring us. How did that understanding come about? What was the journey that we can look at here and take the shortcut to by telling us your whole piece?
Well, I mean, I think in the context of marriage,
Okay.
since that's what this is really about, is that we both had approval issues. I mean, we were both looking for approval from things that happened in our childhood, and then we brought that into marriage and put all that pressure on the other person to fill that need. And without communicating or even recognizing or knowing what that was, you're just frustrated with the other person because they're not fulfilling that need in you.
Yeah.
And so I think that throughout marriage, and like I said, going back to reading books and gleaning from all these things, and being able to make sense of it, you can go, oh, that's what that was. That's what we were trying to do. That's the purpose we were trying to fulfill. But I don't think that, well, I know we did not know that when we got married. We were both frustrated with each other because we needed something, and we thought the other person was just going to fill it, even though we didn't even know what that was that we needed. And so it was because of 28 years together and all of the ups and downs and the whole journey that you go through.
Yeah.
If you don't stop trying to learn and trying to discover, then you have a lot of those aha moments where you're like, oh, that's what I needed from you. That's what I was trying to get. And so I think that for us, I mean, obviously for him, it was dealing with his arm accident and just being born with cerebral palsy. And for me, it was,
Oh, hold
um,
on. Oh, that's big. Hold on, that's huge. That's huge. That's huge. That's huge. Let's slow down. What's talk to me about that space. How did that morph into this shame condition?
Well, I was born with cerebral palsy on my left side, and I've always tried to fit in, always tried to better myself, didn't want to learn how to play sports, did it my own way. And I was on the national handicap ski team when I was in middle school and high school. So that was where I fit in at. When I was 10, going back a little bit, I had my arm cut off in a farm accident, and they put it back on at the Mayo Clinic. So I was always striving to, I was always the one who was hurt or the one who was disabled. And at home, my sister had scoliosis. My brother had some stomach issues when he was a child.
Yeah.
So all of this stuff, all of this shame, all of this, I can't believe it's happening to my children. It was happening to my folks, and they have 3 kids with some sort of ailment or disability. So we didn't have an outlet as a child, or my siblings, we didn't have an outlet to go to say, you know, we're hurting for this, or we're longing for this, because we weren't getting it at home.
Yeah.
We were just trying to survive in our own way, in our own, and the way that we survived was, you know, loud, boisterous. I'm just going to go to my room and then shut the door, but it's just me on the other side of the door, you know, and then I'm having to deal with all of the issues of trying to fit in or fit even at home.
Yeah.
So that was,
and so all
yeah.
these different pieces and the substance abuse in the home. This is the foundation. This is so helpful. It's so helpful to hear that backstory, because sometimes we see the 28 years of marriage, and we're like, well, they didn't face the struggle
Right.
that I faced. If I had their life, well, then I wouldn't have to deal with shame, etc.
right.
So
Sure.
for you, Amy, where did your this core deal? 'Cause you said you both brought it into marriage. Where, when you look back before the aha moment, where do you see that developing and growing from?
I think for me, it was the same thing. So I also grew up in a home with an alcoholic father. My mom and dad got divorced when I was 6, and he was still in and out of our lives for a few years after that. But when I was the youngest of 4 children, and so I was able to kind of like look past the ugliness of it, and I just really adored my dad.
Yeah.
And I am just, my natural born personality is to serve. I've always worked on serving committees, or like I'm cooking, or I don't know, or I'm serving in some way. So it's just me. It's like my personality. And so that's what I did with my dad. Like I was the one who always served him. And back then, you know, you could go to the store with a note from your dad saying that he's giving you permission to buy cigarettes. You know, you could do that back then.
You're like, yeah, I'm here for a rifle. I got a note from my parents.
My little note. And of course, you know, I knew that they were bad for him, but it was my dad asking me, and it's okay if I have curlers in my hair. I'm gonna go to the store because my dad asked me to go.
Yeah.
And so, you know, he'd be laying on the couch watching TV. Can you go get me a Diet Coke? Or Coke? Could you light my cigarette? Can you go get me this? Can you go get me that? And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Because that was my way of getting my attention from my dad.
Gotcha.
And so then when he left and he was out of the picture, there were a couple times where he would come back, maybe just, I was like at my grandparents' house or something, and they're like, your dad's coming. And I hadn't seen my dad in a long time. And he just walks in the living room. He's drunk. He walks right past me, never even saw me. And I guess in my mind, I was like, don't you understand? I will do anything for you.
Wow.
And so it was like, you know, you just felt that rejection. And so then you carry that with you in every single leadership, mentor relationship that you have. So now you're going around just trying to serve everybody, please everybody.
Wow.
And every time that you're rejected, because it's not that person's job to fulfill that in you, and they don't know, you know, then you're just like, you keep playing that same record over and over and over and over again. And you don't, it's like you just feel shame because you're like, well, what's wrong with me?
Wrong with me? Yeah.
Instead of looking and saying, so for us, you know, like when we started developing all of those aha moments, it was like, oh, I need to start looking in the mirror at my own self and say, like my dad, he passed, like both of our dads have passed away.
Yeah.
Like we got to bury our dads,
Yeah.
and we got to just forgive them. And now we have to look at ourselves
Now,
and stop playing that same record over and over and over again,
yeah.
and bury it. Just bury it with our dads.
What brought you? Where did it all come to a head? Because there's always this pivot moment, right? With any breakthrough, you're both carrying the shame that was picked up from these different sources. But there's always this point where, dude, it comes to a head, and you have to decide, what am I gonna do here? We have to figure something out. We have to start learning, like you're saying, or we have to start growing. How did it come to a head in your marriage?
Well, for me, it was reading The Bait of Satan. I remember reading it, and I was reading it, and I don't even remember what it was in the book that I read, but I remember laying it down, and I said, I gotta bury my dad. Because I was just I was that person that was like, well, you don't understand. Like my dad was an alcoholic, and my mom and dad were divorced, and I have father issues and stuff like that. And it was like, I just put the book down and was like, man, I gotta stop holding him accountable for something that he cannot ever fulfill. He's dead. Like it is impossible for him to ever give me that. And so then I was just like, okay, God created us to have a mother and a father, and then when one of them is not there, there's that void. And I remember getting so frustrated because people would be like, well, you just need to let God fill the void. You just need to let God fill the void. Let God be your father. And I'm like, oh, that's really easy for you to say. You have a mother and a father who love you very much, but I'm over here. I don't know how to do that. And it just sounds so cliche, and it's so frustrating because you want like a tangible answer.
Yeah.
And then I was like, you know what? It's true. Brandon can't fill that void. My kids can't fill that void. My pastor will never fill that void. A boss will never fill it. Like literally, God has to be the one to fill it. And once I accepted that, and I was able to bury my dad, forgive my dad, and say, okay, God, I'm ready to let you fill it. I mean, that's not always the answer that we want, especially because we're just naturally born to need a mother and a father.
Yeah.
So when I got to that point where it was like, this is the only possible way to have this healing come, is to allow God to be the one to fill it. And so I knew it was going to be a long process. It was going to be very slow. I was going to say a lot of stupid things and do a lot of dumb things that I would regret. And I would, just all that stuff. But I was constantly working at replacing that shame of, man, maybe if I just loved my dad more, if maybe I just served more, maybe if I would have just done this more, just get over that and work toward myself and letting God fill that void, and having that confidence in God that I'm enough. Like God obviously knows that there's that part of me that's missing, and that will never be replaced. And
this is all happening in the context of the marriage, correct? You guys are married at this point.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that were affecting? How was it affecting the home? Was it we were both dealing with shame at the same time? What was if you had to crack the lid open a little bit to say, hey, start moving towards what we're going to get into in a second about healing the shame, because here's what can happen if it's not healed. What was it like, both trying to walk in shame and marriage and love each other?
I guess I can. It was hard. It was difficult. I feel like the walking in shame is that, I was always looking for approval. I was always looking for an approval, a vote of confidence, and I would do whatever I would have to do to get somebody's approval, instead of looking right at her or my children or my pastor or God himself. Just God loves me exactly how he wants me to look and feel and act. I mean, he loves us unconditionally, right? So I think from my standpoint was just realizing that I have a whole lot to live for. I have my family to live for.
Yeah.
But most of all, I have to be confident in who I am and not look for that approval outside of everything else. But it's going to come from her. It's going to come from us together and my children, and just to be a better person.
Yeah.
And I think too, I mean, we were separated, we weren't not separated in our marriage, but he was gone for 3.5 years. And I remember just being like, man, am I going to stay married to him? Are we going to get divorced? And I was praying and I was just saying, God, why can't I just be married to somebody like this? You know,
No.
these are the things that I need.
Now, when you
And
said 3 years apart, where do we how do we get to there? Talk to me there, because I
Okay,
jump
so
in.
in 2008, I was doing some financial things for a company in Colorado, and I
Gotcha.
don't go that far back, but then in 2000 and between the years of 2009 and 2013, I was robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah.
And I went away for 3.5 years in the state of Illinois.
Gotcha.
So we were away for 3.5 years.
Okay, so
However,
you're talking jail for about 3 years.
yeah, I was in
Okay.
prison at Statesville prison for not Stateville for the whole 3.5 years, but I was away for 3.5 years. So I really had to find who I was.
Yeah. So now, okay, that's
Yeah.
that's huge, and not exciting that it happened, but exciting in as far as
No.
the journey. So
Yeah.
this is
But
this is
here
but
we
this is
are
this is a
today.
big pivotal moment, right? This is where it's
Huge.
it's
Yeah.
coming to a. What are you thinking, Amy? Your husband is leaving to go to jail for 3 years, and you're dealing with shame still, right? At this point, this is kind of like, it sounds like the catalyst. Is this the shipping point where you both started working during this three-year period?
yeah, I mean, for me, I had been working on it for a long time because I'm
Okay.
trying to think when that was that I read that. We were in the big house in Elgin.
2014.
So it was probably about 2012 that I was like, okay, like this, I gotta just start working on
You
this.
gotta-
And I
you
think
gotta-
my dad passed away in like two
Six or
something. So that's when I recognized it. Like I knew what the issue was and I had to work on it. And so then when he went away, I mean, it just everything was taken from us. So I mean, we had to move to Wisconsin. We lost our house. We gave away like 80% of our furniture and stuff. And I started with, I mean, I had nothing.
When I went away, she wasn't even working. So you have to figure there was no income
Mhm.
Yeah,
at all.
yeah.
So now I leave her alone with 2 children and a dog, trying to figure out
Yeah,
where to live.
no home, no income, no nothing. And so I was just kind of like, I don't even know if we're gonna stay married. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just the type of person where I'm constantly working on myself. Like I just never stop. My brain never stops.
Yeah.
Where he's not like that. So he grew up in a home where, like I grew up in a home where, you know, my mom's very analytical. She likes psychology, you know, so that was normal for us to do the home improvement of our brain. But for Brandon in his house, let's just sweep it under the rug and not talk about it. Let's just, oh wait, you got a little arm and, you know, let's not talk about that, you know?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
here I am with
Hated it.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's just
I mean,
common.
just
It's common.
never.
Yeah, yeah.
And so here I am with like all these thoughts and like all these, you know, just I'm analyzing everything.
Here's
and I'm
everything. Let's
trying to
talk. Just
think,
talk. Let's give
Yeah.
it.
And I'm not giving her nothing. No,
Yeah.
I'm good.
nothing,
I'm
good.
nothing
Fine.
at all.
I said I'm
You're
fine.
So when we got to that point of him being away, then we separated and we had our own journeys of like self-discovery and all that kind of stuff. And so for me, this is going back to when you said, what's that pivotal moment?
Yeah.
So I was just like, okay, God, this is what I need. Like, how come I couldn't just have a spouse that did this, and that? And I really do feel like God spoke to me in that moment and was like, first of all, you married Brandon. So you have a commitment to him. Second, you married him. Remember why you married him.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about the reasons why I married him. And I felt like God spoke to me and said, he is still that person that you married.
Yeah.
He's just let a lot of these other things get in the way. You got to come back to the core of who he is. And that's who you married.
Yeah.
So he really is all of this and this and that you needed and wanted in a spouse. It's just been clouded by all of these issues.
Yeah.
But if we can like work past that. And so then I started to realize, ooh, I'm actually responsible. No, I didn't steal any money and I didn't even know that he was doing all of that stuff. But I am responsible for what I did not bring to the marriage.
Right.
And so then I knew, okay, I'm not just completely innocent in this. This is a marriage issue. I mean, yes, it's a sin and a crime, but underneath that, there's marriage stuff that we have to work on that could have possibly got us to here. Because
And the
again,
personal insight is just so good here, guys. I hope anyone that watches this captures some of this stuff that's being said. How even no matter the circumstance that happened in their marriage and where we're at and where what you're working through, right? You're saying that you're still being able, with the presence of God, with Him, to say, "Hey, there are things that I bring to this marriage, and there's things that I need to work on. There are things that God can do through me and in me to guide this thing forward."
Yeah.
Mhm.
How did how did you get there, Brandon? How did you catch up to this space?
Well, I caught up because when you're away, when you're in jail, all you have is yourself and your
Mm,
thoughts in a cell. And I can remember a pivotal moment was when I called her one day and she asked me not to call her for one full week to figure out who I am and what I need to do. And
wow.
that was the longest week that I've ever, because you don't, you're ever, if you ever go away, the worst thing to do is not be able to talk to somebody from the outside because it's just awful. And so that whole week I was just reflecting of who do I need to be for my family? Who do I need to be for her? Who do I need to be for my kids? Who does God want me to be? Who does God see me? How does God see me? And how she fell in love with me was of just I loved everybody. I still do. I mean, I am just an ultimate hugger. Even when I was away, I would hug guys and they would freak out. But anyway,
And a
uh,
baritone. That's like
yeah,
a
yeah,
whole
yeah.
package, you know?
So I just had to take responsibility for who I was in the home. I knew that I wasn't going to be perfect, and my life is, my records there and all of that. But now, who can I be? How can I be the best Brandon for her? How can I be the best Brandon for our kids moving forward? And I think that the one thing that resonated in my heart the most was that Job, in the book of Job, it says the latter part of his life was greater than the former part of his life. And I'm 52, and I want my life. I want the latter part of my life to reflect more than it did the former part of my life. So whatever I can do, whoever I can talk to, whoever I can encourage, even we have to encourage each other every paycheck. We're talking about bills and all of that. Before I was doing what I was doing, I was just hiding all of that. I mean, it's all above board on the table. This is what I'm getting. She knows passwords, all of that good stuff. So it's just very, 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 very important
That
because
transparency is such gold.
yeah,
It's
I
such
didn't want.
gold.
So when I was away, I mean, I had everything, right? I had good life. I thought I had good kids. My kids have never given us any trouble. So why not work harder? Why not work towards a common goal? Who was stopping me?
Yeah,
Nobody was stopping me. I was stopping myself.
right.
He wasn't stopping me because I was in control. But we can only be in control of ourselves. So how do we want to be perceived? Who do we want to help us control each other and emotions? So yeah, it was a tough time of being away, but thankfully, I mean, thankfully God's hand was totally in this, just from the point of me going away for a period of 6 months, 6 months being away, and then I would like not sending her any money home. I was able to go to a work release center, and I was able to work and send her all of my money home. That felt good to
That
me. I
feels
was
good.
able,
I was gonna say
I was
that
able,
had to feel good. You know, you're
oh, it was
finally
huge.
like,
I was able to. I had to live on a budget of $100 a week. You try doing it; it works. You can do it.
I'll let
It's
you. I'll trust you on that one, man.
it's not
I'll
so.
take your word on it.
It was hard,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I people say, man, I can only imagine what you went through. Well, I don't want you to imagine. I want you to just learn and glean from us and our story, and just
And
I'm not saying that. Go
speaking
ahead.
on
I'm
that,
sorry.
and speaking on that learning piece, I'm gonna say two things. I'll talk a little bit just to give you time to get your thoughts right. The question I have though is if you could start either if you had a bulletin board. I love this question, and it's over every marriage that deals with shame, and every day they're gonna drive past it and they're gonna glance up, and you have a bulletin board. Maybe it's playing a movie, maybe it's just a quote, maybe it's a line, a piece of advice. What would you put on for that couple to know that, hey, I get where you're at. I've walked there, but here's your first step. Here's the first either understanding, realization to start moving forward into that space. What would you put on there?
I would probably put communicate, because how is the person supposed to even know what your thoughts are? And that's what's so weird is like when we dated, we talked all the time, and we talked about our home lives, how similar they were. We talked about our ministry goals, but I don't think we really talked about. We talked in a victim mentality, and didn't really talk about core, you know, like
What do you mean by the victim mentality?
like you talk about yourself, but like you're here and you're just talking about all these people that affect you. So it's there's a you, okay, and everything is through the lens of what's going on around you. And
Got it.
so this, it's like my home, my parents, my pastor, my church, all of this stuff. But okay, but who are you? Like who is who's this person right here? Not what has happened to you and who treated you this way and that way, or you know, like, but who are you? And I don't think that him and I ever really talked about that. I don't think that we ever really knew who
Sure.
the other person was
Right.
until we were separated, until he went away. And I was just like, dude, you got to figure out who you are. Cause I'm sitting here, been trying to figure this out for years, and I'll get, you know, and I'll just keep moving forward. But it doesn't really do any good if I'm moving forward and he's still way back here. And I do have these aha moments, or I'm like, man, I was reading this book or whatever. And he's just, they're nothing, you know, you're not giving me anything. And now I know the reason why he wasn't communicating at all with me is because he was living in sin. He was doing things he shouldn't have been doing. He was hiding things. He was managing all of this stuff in his head, trying to keep this thing straight. And I got money over here and money over there. And so
Yeah,
there
and
was
the
a lot
pressure of all that, and the pressure
yeah,
of all that stuff. It's you're trying to provide, but at the same time you're having to hide. And it's I want to be this man, and if I can just get over this last hump, then I'll be able to be the person I'm supposed to be. And then you add on the shame stuff that's been building and building, that builds in all of our lives, right? And now you're in this place of, hey, so on that bulletin board, I love that you have communicate, talk about it, talk about
yeah.
it.
And I mean, with my kids being, you know, my son just getting married and then my daughter being 23, then she went to Urshan. And so we moving here to Missouri, we've had people, you know, in their early 20s in our house. And so we've been able to observe some things, and just seeing people date and then get married. And I think, man, I wish I could, you know, tell them some things, because you obviously, you know, this, you see things and you're like, man,
Yeah.
okay, that's probably going to cause you some problems down the road.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I think that transparency, you know, like, just this is the person that you're going to marry. Like they got to know who you are. And I get it that when you're 20, you're still trying to figure that out, and that's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, we didn't even identify the shame until way later. Like we didn't even know those were the issues. So I'm not saying that they even know at 20 years old. I'm just saying
It's hard to understand. What's if I have shame, I have guilt? What
Mhm.
am I dealing with? How do
Right.
I navigate? Is this something that because we all feel guilty at times, we all feel shame at times. How do we
Well, they're
navigate?
trying to figure themselves out too, right? I mean, we're still trying to figure ourselves out. Every day is a new challenge. So
yeah.
especially for a young person or a younger couple,
I think you just have to feel safe though. I think that's key is
safe zone.
yeah, just feel safe enough to be vulnerable and to say these are my hurts, and this not what someone did to me. This is how I feel. This, and as stupid or crazy or whatever as it sounds, just say it. You know, say it to that person that you're going to marry. Just so that they know, because I mean, you could be getting mad at your spouse for something they said or the way that they made you feel, and they don't know unless you tell them, like, hey, that's a trigger for me. Like, you know, that's that's the way my mom and dad treated me, or that's what. And so that's just, I'm just letting you know that that's when you say those things to me, like that triggers something in me. We never did that. I mean, we never even had those kind of conversations. We would just, if one person got mad, you just go, okay, I guess I'm mad. And
Stormed off, and that was that.
you know, I mean, I would say, can we talk about it?
No,
And he would just walk away, and okay, well, I guess I'll go read a book or something. You know, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all that.
yeah.
And so like when he was away by himself, and I was just like, dude, you can't, there is no us until you figure out who you are. Cause I can't do it by myself. Like I can't work on myself and work on you. Like you've got to take some responsibility here. And while you're doing that, I will take responsibility for myself. Because like I said, God wasn't just, oh, well, you're off the hook. You don't have to be responsible for anything that happened with Brandon. No, he made me be responsible for my part too,
Yeah.
emotionally in the marriage. And so Brandon had just a lot of self-reflecting. And that's when he was able to kind of like identify certain things and go, why in the world did I have a desire to steal this money? Where it wasn't even about the money.
Nope.
So
He
he
was
had to
asking me
figure
about it.
out what was it that was making me do this, to think I had to go please everybody by looking like I had all this money. You're just like, here, yeah, I'll take care of it. I'll take care of you. I'll do anything you want me to do. And, you know,
Right.
So that's what he had to figure out, was where that was coming from.
And it was all coming back from the approval of trying to fit in over having a disability. Not saying that that's why I did what I did, because people ask, why did you do it? I really can't answer that. I was not in my right mind. I was not in a good space at home or spiritually. And I was living inside my own prison, inside my head, in my own life. And then I created a prison for her and the kids while I was awake. So she had all of the pressure to be the breadwinner at home, and raise two kids who are going through high school, the formative years of a child between 12 and 16, and I'm not there. So I did that to myself, right? So I commend her. I commend her for sticking with us, sticking with me, but thankful for God just to say, okay, I got you guys. You guys just need to work on some things separate so you guys could be better together.
Yeah. Yep. And that's, and those, when you mentioned a second ago, you said the prison, right? You said it's a prison.
Sure.
Prison that gets built from this concept of not just, we're talking about shame, we're talking about a lot of things, right? A lot of different things contribute to this pot. But with shame, I always think about in the Garden of Eden, right? Shame was not part of the original design, right? This is something that we inherited from the fall. And one of the things that Jesus was just, so I see you guys smiling. What's on your mind? You guys have something that,
I just told him, I said we gotta talk before we go on this thing. And I was like, I was reading the blog just to refresh his memory, and I said, and I wrote it down. I said, Adam and Eve, it's right here. I wrote it down.
Right there.
I said, it's just like Adam and Eve. They didn't know that they were naked until they sinned, and then they felt shame. But yeah, shame was never even part of the story.
yeah.
Until sin entered in.
Yeah. And one of the most beautiful stories that I find that Jesus did is a lady caught in adultery, thrown at his feet, right? They're all trying to condemn her. And Jesus does something that's amazing. He clears the space around her. All the people that are going to condemn her, before he even deals with the sin or helps her grow, the very first thing he had to deal with is the shame. And it wasn't until he looks at her and says, hey, where are your condemners? And she realizes, oh, there's none. He said, okay, now we can work. Now we can actually go and sin no more, right? And then he turns to the crowd and he screams out, I am the light of the world, or in some translations, this is the revelation of the world. This is what I'm about. I come to deal with your shame. It's so powerful. So let's jump to those 24, 23-year-olds or 30-year-olds that you mentioned earlier. They're there, they're here, they're listening to you. They have shame. They haven't identified it yet. And they're like, talk me through it. How do I start the process of growing? How do I get past this? Give me some tangible steps that we can work on.
I think that you just have to slow down, and when you're feeling something, I think you just have to stop and say, where's this coming from?
Okay.
And I think that's where you have to start. Maybe if you need to write it down. But I think that we get really caught up in emotion, and we react to the emotion that we're feeling without identifying where the emotion is coming from. So I don't think that a person can really know who they are or deal with shame until they identify it. And so in the blog, I wrote the difference between guilt and shame is guilt is, okay, so I use this example all the time. So Brandon, he committed a crime and he was guilty. And so there were consequences, and he went to prison, and okay, that's it. There's guilt, there's consequences. It's cut and dry.
Yep.
But with shame, it's like, it's not even sometimes that you did something. Sometimes it could be that something happened to you, but there is something there. And it's not just, oh, this happened and then this is the consequence. It's this happened and now it defines every single thing that happens in my life. Everything that happens in my life is tied to this. Where guilt is, it's just cut and dry. It's just, I did something wrong and here's consequences. Now it's over. Shame plays the same scenario over and over and over and over again. It's like an internal obsession of criticism. And it begins to define you. So if you don't look back, and I think for me, thankfully, because I had a mom who was very she's just so into psychology and all this kind of stuff. I was able to recognize, I always knew that it was a father issue, but I didn't know why. Why would I feel shame? Why would I feel shame because my mom and dad got divorced when I was 6? Why does that have anything to do with me? Why am I allowing that to define me? But I think it was the combination of my love for my dad and my personality and really my calling and my gift to serve, because I feel like that is a gift that I have in ministry, is to serve. It got like all messed up somewhere in there where it began to, I wasn't using it for the right reasons now. It was a gift, but now I was using it for approval because of how I felt as a child. And so, and it was the same thing with him. So he has, I mean, he was able to play every single sport. He, like you said, he just loves people. He doesn't necessarily love this about himself, but he's great at sales. So he's got all these like really good, charismatic, outgoing, extroverted personality things going on. But, and those are good. Those are his gifts. But when those gifts are tied to shame, then now they're used in the wrong way. And so that's how he was able to get caught up in like the financial stuff and the crime and all that, because those weren't, it was like that was a strength and he was very good at it, but it became his weakness because it was tied to this idea that because I have a physical disability and it's kept me from following like the dreams that I thought that I had, now I have to prove to everybody like, hey, I'm not just my arm. Hey, I'm not a failure because I have this disability. And so it's, I think that you just have to identify it. And if you don't know how to do that, really, you just have to pray about it and ask God to show you and to reveal it to you, and just say, God, where is this coming from? Why am I reacting like this right now? And I just need you to show me and to help me with that.
Yeah, that why question is huge. This why question is huge. And I remember one of the quotes that you put into that blog. It said around shame. It says becomes an identity. That's when you know you're dealing with shame. So when it becomes, this is just part of who I am, rather than, like you're saying, a consequence of something that you do. Mm-hmm. Final question that I'm gonna throw out there for you guys is, what bad advice have you gotten through the years when it came to dealing with shame or marriage, etc.? What bad advice did you give? Have you heard, and how would you tweak it just a little bit? Because usually bad advice is almost good advice, right? How would you tweak it that would say, hey, this would have gotten us to where we're at now? We're always on a journey. Cami and I do this for a living, right? We work with all over the place, seminars, all this stuff. We still have to work on the stuff, right? And we'll always be doing that. But what are some bad advice pieces that you're like, if I just could have known this earlier, things would have been a little bit easier?
Well, we were never really given much marital advice.
Listen to her. No.
I think that kind of the problem with us is that we did not have any like premarital counseling, and we didn't talk to anybody. So we just didn't have any advice, period.
We didn't even talk to ourselves about this stuff.
That's huge. And that's huge. No advice. Huge. That's probably the worst advice, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Nobody stepping into that space and saying, hey, get some help. Partner with someone. Read
or people that we know now that people saw things, but we're like, wow. I mean, no one said anything. No one said a word to us. Everyone just assumed that we had
it all together.
Yeah, and that's frustrating. Yeah. I don't like that at all.
I could tell. Anyway, you wanted to punch something right there. Just saying, just thinking about it. I could see the physiological response to it.
Well, yeah, there's a lot there, because when people think you have money, they just think that
everything's good. Yeah, their life, yeah, and it's the opposite, right? The more money that you get.
We didn't have any money. We were just
or even worse, you just think it looks like we have money. Really, we have nothing at all.
It's my fault. My fault.
Hey, that's what these type of things though, like why it's so important. Why I love. We've mentioned it again. I'm gonna put some of this stuff into the comments on here as well, into the description. I'm gonna put the Bait of Satan, a link to that. We've mentioned the blog, right? We mentioned, I know you said you had some groups. I know it's, some people don't like to, but like we said earlier, people need to know where to go. They need to know where to turn to. You mentioned a second ago about sales, that you're a good salesman. Understanding that that's actually a service, because so many people, they actually need to be convinced of what kind of value, if someone would have sat down with you guys and convinced you year 2 that you guys need to have conversations together and you need to communicate, what would that have been worth to you if you want to put a dollar amount on it, if someone would have been able to convince you at that age, hey, here's how you can avoid years of pain, years. Sales is not bad. Sales is actually a service and it's a gifting. Lean, I can't say it enough. I'm not here for that, but lean into that. Lean into that gifting. Convince people, even when they're like, ah, no, convince them, because they need it. They so need it. With that, I want you to talk to us about some ways that people can continue connecting with you. In this 45-minute, 55 minutes, you've touched on a lot of things, but you have content out there. I was scrolling through, right? What are ways that people can stay connected with you to get that boost, to get that understanding, to receive even more information from you guys?
Well, so obviously through the blog, which is servosjourney.com. And then on there is a Facebook link to join the group page that we have on Facebook. And it's a private group because I wanted to be able to expound a little bit more on certain things that I wrote in the blog that weren't public and I also wanted people to feel like it was a little bit of a safer space to say anything that they wanted to say. Because of the blog too, I've also had people just message me. I've had conversations with people as a result of reading the blog that are going through some things in their own marriage or maybe just, I know one of my friends, I had no idea that she was dealing with shame about something that happened in her childhood.
Yeah.
And she was able to message me after we've been disconnected through the years because we don't go to church. We don't even live in the same state or anything anymore.
Yeah.
The things like that, like where people just messaged me and reached out that way. But it starts with the blog. The blog will take you to the Facebook group page if you want to be a part of that. And then just messaging me directly.
I love it. And again, if you're out there, you're hearing anything in this piece that you're like, hey, I like that. I want to hear more about it. This is an exclusive group that's being offered. Okay, you're not just going to scroll and get in there. Randoms aren't going to get in there. This is an exclusive group where you actually can read the blog, right? And blogs, you can only give so much into it, but now you actually get to hear behind the scenes of the blog because that's where the power comes in. The blogs are cool. They help, they encourage, they give an idea. But when you get to see behind the screens, you hear the story. You hear about being in prison. You hear about the home and how the background. Now you're like, oh my goodness, this is me. Right? Maybe it's not prison. Maybe I joined the military and was overseas, acting like an idiot, whatever that deal is, there's that. I get it. And this is why I can't encourage you enough. Jump into that, get involved. I'm actually going to send over a request to see if I can weasel my way sneak into that group as well. Thank you guys. Anything else jump out to your mind? Sometimes the best things come right at the end. They're like, oh, I want to leave a watcher, a listener, or me saying, hey, one more thing that say, hey, I want you to take this away.
Just one thing that I wrote down that I feel very strongly about, like very passionately about this being my message to people, is that, and this kind of goes back to, this is my message to Brandon as well. When you're born, you don't know anything different than who you are. You are who you are. So with him being born with cerebral palsy, obviously the one side of his body is smaller, but as a little boy, he was just who he is. He didn't see himself as being different.
Yeah.
He was just Brandon. And it wasn't until people started pointing out like, oh, you're different, and oh, you have a disability, and you can't do this, and you can't do that, that you start to go, oh, I'm different. And that's what I meant, like with Adam and Eve. It was just like that realization that, oh, all of a sudden you're aware of yourself.
Yeah.
And I say this to people who sing all the time. I'm like, you'll be up there singing and all of a sudden you go, I'm up here singing, and you're aware of yourself. And it's in that moment of being aware of yourself that the insecurities come and the shame, really, because none of us are perfect. But I think that that's one thing that you have to realize is that no matter what labels you put on yourself or other people put on you, or whatever you want to call it, disability, or you're different, or it's this or it's that, there's still a core of who you are and who you were created to be. And to God, that person is perfectly, wonderfully, beautifully made. And it's the stuff that we bring in and that is projected on us that makes us who we are, but it doesn't have to define who we are. And so, like, you just constantly have to go back to the core, and you have to repent, and you just have to say, God, I'm sorry that I listened to the voices. I'm sorry that I I let all this stuff pile on me and in my mind and define who I am because I am who I am. I am who you created me to be. And I think that that's people need to just know that. They just need to know that, and they need to be confident in that and walk in that. We live in a world where people label you, and he was labeled with cerebral palsy. It's a medical condition that he has, but he's still a child of God, perfectly made the way that he is. And so that is one of my biggest, I just want people to know that.
Amazing. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys so much. God bless you. Thanks for jumping on. We got to do it again sometime.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Okay.